Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with another in our series of 10 stunning albums of non-standard repertoire. Well, sometimes we do 12 on independent labels. And the label we're talking about now is Lyrita, one of the all-time great and somewhat mysterious independent labels. Lyrita was the brainchild of a somewhat eccentric British guy named Richard Itter, I believe his name was. And he wanted to do what we really want, which is unusual repertoire, in this case British repertoire, 20th century British repertoire, with the best quality sound and the best quality performers and major orchestras in London. That was a big ask, because that was going to be expensive and it would have been very difficult. But he managed to do it. And the way he managed to do it was by basically getting everyone to donate their services, but no, basically by having Decca engineers on the sly make the recordings for him, because they believed in the cause. And that was just a wonderful thing. What fascinates me about the Lyrita recordings is that they sounded so much better on average than the Decca recordings of the same period, using the same engineers. But they did amazing work because, you know, the English 20th century English Renaissance is one of the great musical happenings. It really was. You know, we have a very strange sense of periodicity, a wrong sense of periodicity in music. And I've talked about this before. It's winner's history. So what we say is that the Romantic period ended here, and then the modern period started with this, and we trace it through what we think are the most important musical trends. And we do what the academics tell us. And the academics are totally biased and nationalistically prejudiced, and they do it the way they think it's important. Like we think that the event of 12-tone music was a thing. Well, it was a thing, but it was a small thing. The vast majority of the universe kept on writing lovely tonal music, which was roundly ignored by the umpas who controlled our musical life for that, pile of decades in the middle of the 20th century. So the result is a totally skewed view of what really was going on. Also, we are told that the Romantic nationalist period basically died with Wagner, that it ended around the turn of the 20th century, and after that everything else was terribly regressive. But that's not true. What happens is that in real life, every country has its Romantic nationalist awakening whenever they have it, whenever the resources exist for them to have it. That is, there has to be a musical infrastructure in place. There has to be some sort of group of composers who care about national music, folk music, things like that. And it happened in every country at a slightly different pace, at a different time. And what matters is not whether it's modern or not modern, or conservative or radical or whatever. What matters is whether or not they wrote good music in that style. And in the UK, the Romantic nationalist awakening was a post-20th century phenomenon, post-turn of the 20th century phenomenon. It began really with Elgar in the 1890s, and then Vaughan Williams and Holst and that whole first generation, and Bax and Walton, and then there were a whole, the second generation, and it all just kept going that way for a while. Now, of course, there were English avant-gardists, English 20th century composers who were, as screechy and annoying as everybody else was being. But where the music was great and best was with the more conservative composers, who were only conservative in the sense that their music was tonal and they wrote in traditional forms. But they were full of personality and character and color, and they created a school of composition that was completely original and like no other. And around the time that Lyrita was getting going, some of these composers were well known, or were respected, at least Vaughan Williams, Britten, Tippett, those people. And others were barely known at all, or were ignored, or were only known locally. And even locally in the UK, the ones who controlled things were the ones who owned, the means of production, the BBC and the orchestras of those people. So you needed to have, it was difficult to break into the old boy network, into the power structure that was contemporary music in the UK at that time, even though there were lots and lots of fine composers. And what happened was that they would get played once, or one of their works would be played, and then they'd disappear forever. And Lyrita was out to remedy that. It wanted to demonstrate what the range of contemporary 20th century British music was. Some of it was quite difficult. They did some avant-garde stuff, but not much. Most of it was much more traditional, because you wanted to do things that you thought people would enjoy listening to, which is like, God forbid, right? And that's what they did. So I have here 10 remarkable recordings, stunningly fabulous recordings that were recorded in glorious sound, wonderfully engineered on the Lyrita label. Now, Lyrita has since been taken over by Nimbus, which is handling its pressing and the catalog, which is wonderful because they've made it all available. But you have to keep in mind, and I warn you in this, that there are, Lyrita has been kept going by licensing live material from the BBC, some of which is splendid, but some of which is average air check quality. It's not the sonic quality that Lyrita was known for, or the performance quality quite often. So be careful. Be careful. If it says a BBC recording, you have to know what you're getting. You have to know what you're getting first. I'm talking about original Lyrita productions here, because those are the ones that established this reputation. And when these things started coming out, collectors were going nuts because the sound was so great and they were so hard to get. And they were expensive. They were premium priced product. And they were very hard to find outside of the UK. Sometimes you could get them as imports and they disappear. It was a real project. So it's wonderful that this stuff is available on CD. And Itter did not at first believe in digital recording because he was English, and he, was all for things like, gas stoves and pre-electric things, and, driving around in a horse and buggy, and, that was, okay. Anyway, he was a visionary, and he made amazing recordings. So we begin with some unusual Holst, because there's a lot more to Holst than the planets. So this disc, which features David Atherton and the London Philharmonic and the London Symphony, contains a winter idyll, the Elegy in Memoriam William Morris, which is from his Cotswold Symphony, which has since been recorded many times. Indra, his symphonic poem, ooh boy, from 1903. A Song of the Night for violin and orchestra. Sitta, the interlude from Act 3. This was a whole opera thing he wrote, which Holst totally disavowed later in life. His Invocation for cello and orchestra. The Lure, his ballet music for orchestra. And Dances from the Morning of the Year, which is another one of those ballet things. These choral ballets and things have all been issued and recorded in full since then. But this was a wonderful sampler of strange Holst in its day. So yeah, good stuff. Then we have Malcolm Arnold. Oh, this was a classic. This was an audio demonstration disc. It was the English dances and the Irish dances and Scottish dances. And later, when they reissued this, they added on CD the Cornish dances and the saraband and polka from the ballet Solitaire, which is the last two bits of, if you do all the English dances at once, you get this ballet Solitaire with the saraband and polka added at the end. This is with the London Philharmonic, conducted by the composer. And number 4, English Dances, Book 1, Set 1, number 4. Da 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 da. I played all these in band. There were band arrangements for these. Oh my God, is it wonderful! And sonically, this was. I used to bring this into hi-fi shops and say to people, "Listen to this," and they would go, "Where do I get it?" And I would be saying, "Well, you can't. It's hard to find." Amazing, and it, more than anything else, I think, sort of got the Malcolm Arnold revival going, because these pieces have become very, very popular since, and deservedly so. They are wonderful. Next, Havle Brian. Havle Brian, who is such a strange composer. He wrote 32 symphonies, or 31 or something like that. This is Symphonies number 6, the Tragica, in one movement, 19 minutes long, and number 16. They are wonderful pieces. And it just goes to show just how good Havle Brian could sound when he's played really well and recorded really well. Because if you don't get that, it just sounds like a jumble. It's a big, overscored, heavy, thick jumble mess. And these are with the London Philharmonic under Meyer Fredman. And on the CD issue was added Arnold Cook's Symphony No. 3 in D major, with Nicholas Braithwaite conducting. Cook is also a good composer. He's sort of a neo-Hindemith kind of guy. I don't think that's terribly helpful, but his music is sort of wiry and energetic, and very, very enjoyable symphony. This is not the Cook third, but these two Havle Brian symphonies are powerful. And No. 6 is glorious, and this is an extraordinary recording of it. It really is. So that's great. And then, let's see, John Foulds. This was one of the last composers, actually, that the old Lyrita discovered. This was recorded in 93. It was a late recording with the London Philharmonic and Barry Wordsworth. John Foulds was a fascinating character. He ran off to India. His wife was one of these Indian mystic type ladies or whatever, but he wrote tons of stuff in India, all of which is lost. And he was known in the UK basically as a composer of light music, but he wrote a couple other pieces like A World Requiem, which has now been recorded, and these extraordinary pieces here. One was the dynamic triptych for piano and orchestra, and 3 mantras, which is on this disc. The mantra of activity, the mantra of bliss, and the mantra of will. 25-minute symphonic composition full of driving rhythms and exciting pulse-pounding music, fully modernist in its overall conception. Really just an extraordinary piece. You also get Hellas, a suite of ancient Greece, one of his lighter works. April, England, the Pasquinade Symphony No. 2, and Le Cabaret Overture. These are all zippy, lighter works. But he was a craftsman and a fine, fine composer. And all this stuff has been recorded again now since then. But that's okay, because these were stunning. Absolutely amazing. William Mathias, a fabulous composer, Welsh composer, and this disc of 3 concerti is just amazing. You get his Clarinet Concerto, Opus 68, his Harp Concerto, which is one of the great harp concertos ever. Just listen to the finale. It'll blow you away. It's gorgeous, gorgeous. And his Piano Concerto No. 3, which is also fabulous. It's kind of like Prokofiev goes to Wales, if you can imagine such a thing. The soloists are Gervais de Payer and Ossian Ellis and Peter Caton, and the New Philharmonia and the London Symphony under David Atherton. These are all, I think, people who these works were written for. I may be wrong, but it's certainly true of Ossian Ellis, and wow, are they good pieces. Really, really good pieces. He also wrote 3 terrific symphonies, which are on Nimbus, if they're still available. And then we've got Adrian Bolt, good old Adrian. Sir Adrian made a few Lyrita recordings. He did the Elgar Symphonies. He did Bach's Tone Poems. And what else did he do? Oh, he did a couple other things too. But best of all, or one of the best of all, was this one of John Ireland, who was, he wrote very little orchestral music. He wrote mostly piano works. He was known as one of the teachers of Benjamin Britten, and as an atrocious alcoholic, which is probably why he didn't write more, orchestral pieces. What that has to do with alcoholism, I don't know, but it happened to E.J. Moeran too. We'll get to him in a minute. Oh, Bolt did that too. That's in here. Anyway, the Legend for Piano and Orchestra, the Overture Satyricon, his Piano Concerto, which is gorgeous. Fabulous, fabulous, perky piano concerto, which should be as popular as anything anybody wrote. These Things Shall Be, which is for baritone with John Carroll Case, in this case, and 2 symphonic studies, a fugue and a toccata arranged by Geoffrey Bush, who was also a very good composer, by the way, who appeared on Lyrita as well. It's with the London Phil Choir, and Eric Parkin is the pianist. Eric Parkin was the Ireland guy. That was his specialty. He knew this music better than anyone in the universe, and Adrian Bolt is the conductor quite well. So that's lovely. Then we have George Lloyd. Of course, we got to do George Lloyd. Now, George Lloyd, as we know, I'm talking about Lyrita has now the complete Lloyd recordings, featuring Lloyd and some others, that were done, with the composer's participation, mostly with the Albany Symphony in the UK for some of the others. But originally, what got the ball rolling were these recordings with the Philharmonia Orchestra conducted by Edward Downes of Symphonies 4, 5, and 8. The first one that came out, I think, was 8, and then 5, or the other way around. But oh, the 5th, it's so beautiful. And they're still fabulous, wonderful performances. Really, really great. So it's worth remembering that these were the things that got the ball rolling. And Lloyd was, of course, very happy with these performances, even though he later made his own. And they still are classics of their genre. And the symphonies are fabulous pieces. And so it's worth mentioning. There have been some subsequent Lloyd reissues, too, of BBC broadcast recordings, which are, generally speaking, not as good because of the sonics. So go for those. The Edward Downes recordings, which are great. Here's the Moeran Symphony in G minor. We talked about this as one of the greatest recordings ever. And it is. It's phenomenal. This is with Adrian Bolt. And you can go and look at that video if you want to. We don't have to go through it again, but I wanted to mention it again here because I think it looks better if we put it in context. It's just such a great thing. Then we have Tippett's The Midsummer Marriage. Now, this was originally released on Philips. You know, Philips had all of the Tippett stuff because Colin Davis was a passionate advocate of Tippett's music, and he recorded, a bunch of symphonies and the major operas, and they were all released on Philips, and then they were all deleted on Philips. And happily, Lyrita got their hands on this, because this is one of the great 20th century opera recordings of one of the great 20th century operas. And it was splendidly recorded as well. I mean, it's fully Lyrita-like sonically. And the cast is amazing. It's Alberto Remedios, Joan Carlyle, Raymond Herrings, Elizabeth Harwood, Stuart Burroughs, Helen Watts, Stafford Dean, Elizabeth Bainbridge. I mean, top-notch cast of English singers. The opera itself is the Magic Flute, updated and Freudianized or Jungianized, if you want to put it that way. And the music is just amazing. It's a terrific piece, and I'm so happy that Lyrita got this, because otherwise we would be in real trouble. And last but not least, this was the recording that got me going on Lyrita. It was actually issued on Musical Heritage Society by license. A bunch of Lyrita titles were. So that was a happy thing, and that's how I heard it. Then I got the original. Bach's Symphonies numbers 2 and 5. Number 2, of course, was the one I got. It was, I think, a separate thing. But were they together? They couldn't have been. No, it was number 2. And it was with the London Philharmonic under Meyer Fredman, who just did a splendid job. It's still the best Bach's 2 out there. Hands down, it's the best one. And number 5 is also terrific with Raymond Leppard. Wonderful, wonderful works. On CD, of course, you got 2 symphonies, so that was a good deal, where you had to get them separately when they were on LP. And I so vividly remember grabbing those LPs and washing them and sudsing them. I got them at Goodwill. At the Goodwill in Milford, Connecticut, which was next to the Firehouse, downtown Milford. And they had this huge, I don't know where they got it from. I've told you this story before. I also got all the Carol Shania Superfund recordings of like Dvorak symphonies and Václav Talich. And someone dumped stuff. What they were doing in Milford, I have no clue. But this was there. And oh my, the Bach's Second Symphony just blew my mind. I still think it's his best symphony, actually. 5 is really great too. But this was, and the sonics, oh my God, it sounds so beautiful. It's got organ pedals and incredible. Blew my mind. Just blew my mind. And it will still blow yours. Bach's 2 and 5. Don't forget this. There it is. With Meyer Fredman and Raymond Leppard or Leppard or whatever, he changed his emphasis at some point in his career, I think. When I was growing up, it was Leppard. Then it became Leppard. I don't know. I don't care. It's great. It's Bach's. Thank you, Baxia, the planet Baxia, and Lyrita. So there you have it, my friends. 10 stunning recordings of offbeat repertoire on a wonderful independent label that, at the very least, maintained an extraordinary standard of quality throughout its history when it was in its heyday. And the recordings are still with us, and they're accessible. So access them and keep on listening, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.